to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Melton Jefferson, Certified Master Athletic Administrator, the Director of Athletics at North Creek High School in the state of Washington. Melton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our international audience where you grew up, where you went to school, your first job, etc.
I would say where I grew up was Dallas, Texas. Born in Oklahoma, raised in Texas. So you could kind of say I'm a Okie/Texan, but my heart's still in Texas because that's where my family is. Um, it's and what was the other part I had spaced it. I was all excited to talk about
Uh,
where I came from.
where you went to college, your first job.
I had the opportunity to go to Rick's Junior College in Idaho. Then after I graduated from there in 1997, that makes me kind of a little old. And then I transferred home to the University of North Texas. And then I moved up to Washington in 99. And then I had the privilege of going back to school in 2017 and graduating from BYU, Idaho, 19 from UW, and then again in 21 from Northwest University. So I've had the opportunity to receive 4 degrees. My first job, I guess as a youth, I mowed lawns with some good friends of mine back in Texas. And then my first job here in the state of Washington, I have a history of being in customer service.
Perfect. So how long have you been the athletic director at North Creek?
This will be my 7th year as the athletic director at North Creek High School. I had the privilege of opening North Creek back in 2017 when we opened up, but at that time I was the campus supervisor, working closely with my administration staff and just kind of keeping our campus safe. Um, Kind of became that big brother on campus. When we first opened,
Okay.
we only had 9th, 10th, and 11th graders on campus. And so it was a new thing in our community. We just split one of our high schools, and so a lot of kids would have gone to the other high school in town. So, when North Creek opened, there was um, there was excitement, but at the same time a little bit of angst because it was something new.
Excellent. Let's have you talk. You mentioned you grew up in Texas, so I assume you're a Cowboys fan.
I am not a Cowboys fan. I
Well,
am
okay.
I'm a long diehard. I have to go old school Washington Redskins, Washington Commanders fan. Um,
You're a man after my heart. I love the Redskins and now the Commanders. Give me your thought. Totally off the subject. I thought they should have renamed them the Commodores rather than the Commanders. I
I
thought
was
that
hoping
was a better name.
I was hoping for the Commodores as well. It's an interesting story. When I was younger, my uncle, who was an avid football fan, for some reason, anytime he was watching football, the Washington was on. And
Hmm.
so I go back to the Jacoby days with Riggins and those
Uh-huh.
guys playing, with the Hogs playing. So that's where I got my love for the Redskins, the Commodores, the Commanders, and just have always stuck with them, even in the bad times. I'm still rooting for them. And so it was actually really nice to see them do really well last year. A great pick last year, and so I'm excited to see what they do again this year. So I'll be cheering them on like always.
That's awesome. Let's have you talk then. While you grew up in Texas, did you have any opportunity to play youth sports?
I didn't play any youth sports growing up. Actually, let me take that back. Long, long ago, when we first moved to Texas from Oklahoma, I played youth baseball. And when we played because my neighbor had asked me to play with him and his twin boys. And that's kind of how I got my start in baseball. But how I really got my start in baseball is my mom was she played community softball. And
Okay.
she knew was getting a love for baseball. And so my mom actually taught me baseball. Um, that was our connection together. I mean, we would spend hours hitting ground balls. And there was, to be very honest with you, there was a time I actually hated her because of I would rather be doing out being with my friends, but I had to go take ground balls for my mom. And so that helped me become a better third baseman. And so I'm very grateful for that time I actually got to spend with her now that I'm an adult. And she's since passed away. But I look back at those times going, man, I'm glad I got to spend that time with my mom. And that was back when you used a wooden bat and she would just drill them to me. And so I'm very grateful for her for that. And then I
That
played
is
high school baseball. I played high school baseball for a couple of years, and I spent most of my time playing high school football until injuries put that to halt. So it was a
that's a
great.
great story. Thanks for sharing. Now, the listeners don't know this. You came recommended from obviously the NIAAA Associate Director, Big Rich Barton. So talk about how you met him, because obviously everybody here in Utah knows Big Rich.
Oh well, we had our WASA conference. It's our state athletic directors conference this past 2 weekends ago, and just so happened I sit on the WASA exec board as the at-large BIPOC committee member, and we were having a Section 8 meeting. And to me, I had no idea what I was walking into, but I was excited to be a part of this meeting. And so I gave a few comments, and then on the Sunday session, Rich was speaking. And two of his slides had something to do with what I was familiar with. Because not a lot of people have a BYU symbol in their presentation unless they have some type of
Sure.
affiliation. And then the
Uh-huh.
other picture was a missionary going on his mission. So after Rich was done, I walked up to him and I go, looks like we got something in common. And he's like, what do you mean? I go, those two pictures. And he goes, are you LDS? And I go, yes, I am. And so we got to talking about and because I told him I went to BYU Idaho, Rich College, and he kind of shared his story about how he had gone there as well and been in Idaho, and I told him I'd spent some time in Provo, and one of my former companions played at BYU, Ben Cahoon. I'm going to name drop here
Huh?
for a second. Um, and so Ben and I served together in Philadelphia on our missions, and um, so Rich and I had the chance to sit and talk for a while. And so we shared some personal stories with one another. And and he wrapped his arm around me and said, "Hey, I'm glad I was able to come to this conference this weekend, and I'm glad I got to meet you." And and it kind of throughout the weekend, we just found ourselves standing there talking. And then I presented I presented on Monday morning. And I'm thinking when I first walked into the room, there was only like 4 or 5 people in the room. And I walked out to go find a microphone, and I come back in, and there's probably now 35 people in the room, and Big Rich and his crew is sitting in the front row. And this just got a little, a little nervous. And so, um, and I felt like I did a great job in just having people interact with each other and learn from one another. And Rich came up to me and said, "Hey, you did a great job." And so did Tim and Toll and Dustin all came up and said, "Hey, you knocked it out of the park." And so it was good to hear from the AAA guys to say, "Hey, you did a great job." So
That
kind of
is
eased my.
awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Let's have you talk for a minute about some of the mentors and leaders you've had in your life that have made a difference to you.
I have to if I get sentimental, it's because the first person I always talk about is my mom. Um, she she had 4 kids. She had technically had five. We had a brother die at birth, but she raised three of the four pretty much on her own because my pops was a truck driver, and she showed me that no matter what you do, you can overcome. And so it was one of those things where I struggled in high school, like big time. And without my mom, I would have never graduated. But I knew my mom believed in me. And it was like also one of those things where I didn't really have a choice because she's like, "You're graduating." And so I always looked to my mom as my strength and the person I always said, "Hey mom, I need your help." And she always had a word of kindness, a word of sternness, a way of showing that love for me that I needed at times. Even as a grown man, there's been times where I called her before she passed away and said, "Mom, I just need to hear your voice." And she was there for me. My other person would be my grandfather, who I'm named after. He helped build the railroad in Oklahoma. Just a man of stature, a man of Christ, a man of character. And so I had a good example in him, and I had the opportunity to spend many summers with just me and him, and just asking questions, learning, watching, and just knowing that this man cared about me was everything I ever needed. And then my third person, and I know none of these people have anything to do with athletics, but these are my mentors through for my heart. Earl Snow was my youth leader in church, and I worked for him for 7 years, and he's the reason I went to college. Um, I just remember we were coming from a job one day, and he looks at me and he goes, "You need to go to college." And I looked at Earl and said, "Dude, you realize I just barely graduated from high school, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, I know, but you need to go to college." And I go, "Okay, slow down here, mister." And so what he did is he started taking half of my paycheck and putting it in the bank. So he would take half and I would get half. And so the first couple of times I was like, man, I need my money because I'm a young man. I want all my money, right? Because I got things
Sure.
to do. And so and Earl, if you ever knew Earl, he was about 6'3", big statue, but a heart of gold. And when I left to go to college, I had about 6 grand in my pocket because of him. And so I always go back to say thanks, Earl, for believing in me and kind of encouraging me to say, hey, you need to go to school. And I'm very grateful that I did. Because in our household, my parents never talked about college. It was just never something we ever, I guess my parents never even considered because my mom knew I struggled, but Earl saw that and knew that I needed it. And so I kind of started the process, but just so happened another man in our stake showed up in my house one day and said, hey, I want to take you to a BYU Rich College fireside. And I only knew this gentleman because I went to school with his daughter. And so we go to the fireside, and both BYU and Rick said, hey, send your application in and we'll get you in. I'm like, do I really want to go to BYU or would I fit in more at Rick's? So I only sent my application to Rick's. And so fast forward a few months, now it's like people are starting to prepare to go to college, and I hadn't heard anything yet. And so I call Rick's College and I go, hey, I haven't heard anything about if I got accepted or not. And they were like, let us check and we'll call you back. And they called me back and they go, well, there's been a mix-up. I'm like, what do you mean there's been a mix-up? They're like, which Melton Jefferson are you? I mean, and I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, well, we have two files. One says Melton Jefferson and one says Melton T. Jefferson the third. And I go, I'm both. Just look at the names. And so once they put the files together, they realized, oh, we created a problem for ourselves. And so I actually got a verbal acceptance over the phone to go to Rick's College in Idaho. And so I called my mom and I said, Mom, I'm going to college. And she goes, what do you mean? I'm like, I got accepted to Rick's College. And my mom was so proud and so happy that the kid that nobody ever said would become anything was going to college. And so you fast forward from 94 to 97, first member of my family first child to graduate from college.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I have a follow-up question. So you're Melton Jefferson the third. Your grandpa was the first. So obviously your dad was Melton Jefferson the second. So
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever had a person the third on our show. So thank you so much for that. That is awesome. And
Welcome.
thanks for sharing that example of those great people. Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question here, Melton. What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
I was thinking about that question earlier. I would say my biggest failure in my life so thus far is not going to college sooner. Because I felt like if I would have gone to college sooner, I could have made a career choice sooner. But I'm glad that I took the path that I did because I had to learn how to become the person I am today. Um, when I look back at how I got to where I am today, it's been a journey. There's been and just put this out. There's been two marriages that I've walked not walked away from, but I've separated from. I've had raised two children, helped raise two children on a very meager income, and still try to be a father. Um, but I feel like those things made me a better person. Am I perfect? Not by a long shot. But I feel like I've become a better person because of those challenges. And I'll say this, that even when things were hard, I knew my Father in heaven was still looking out for me. Because I know there were some pretty dark days that he pulled me through. And I'm very grateful for that. But I would say going to college sooner would have been, doing that would have been better. But, you know, getting into coaching kind of got me to where I'm at now. And so I'm grateful for the pathway.
Thanks for sharing that. Let's talk for a minute about the profession of athletic administration. You've been an AD for 7 years. Talk about how it's changed in the 7 years, or what's the same about it.
I'd probably say the biggest change is I joined. I'll start from the beginning here. In 2019, when I became the AD, things were like, you're drinking through a water hose, as they say. Next thing you know, March of 2020 hits and everything shuts down. And I got to go tell my seniors who have been preparing for this senior year, it was spring of that 2020, have been preparing for, okay, this is our run in our sports. This is going to be our year. And I got to go tell them we're shutting down. And they'll watch the tears well up in their eyes. And they're like, what do you mean? When do we get to come back for this? And I go, we don't. This is it. And having to hug and, and say, I'm sorry. And then be gone for a year and a half. And then to come back slowly, it's been the change of getting kids back to that joy for athletics has been the biggest challenge. Some of them have always had it, but some of them feel like, oh, I'm an athlete, I should be able to get to do this, right?
Mhm.
Not exactly. You get to do it because of the things that you prepare for, or you're preparing with it. Your education is the most important. Athletics is a byproduct of your education. It's a hand in hand. So if you're not getting it done in the classroom, you're not going to get it done in your field of choice. And so I just always remind them, if you can be on time to class, be productive in class, just be in the classroom, something's going to stick. And that way, when you have to go talk to a teacher about, hey, I'm struggling in your class, how can I improve my grade? Now a teacher's more likely to help you. But if you're late, constantly absent, not turning in your homework, you've kind of been a pain, no teacher's going to go above and beyond to help you out. And so I have to remind them being prepared is important because this prepares you for life. And it teaches you how to be a teammate because you're going to be, whoever you work for, you're going to be a member of a team. Be able to pull your weight is what I try to help them understand. And like I said, coming back out of COVID, and we're a few years removed, that's no longer the excuse. Now it's on the
Mhm.
individual to get the work done. What are you doing when nobody's watching is what I try to say. And then I try to just say, hey, when I'm not here, early morning, I'm in the gym. So I can let you know, hey, if I can get up and do it, so can you. And so I try to set the example of being prepared physically and mentally for the day.
That is awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Let's talk for a minute now about your journey with Wausau, how you got involved. Obviously, you're quite involved at the state level. You're on their board. And so someone took you under their wing, or you just figured, I'm an AD, I'm going to join the group. How did that happen up there?
I'll go back and talk about two of my other mentors. Um, I had worked with these two individuals on different occasions before I became a coach and before I became an athletic director. I'd coached football for several years, and Yanni Mills was my AD at Bothell High School, and then Lance Gather was the AD at Inglemoor High School. And I'd worked a couple of tournaments with Lance, wrestling tournaments, and I'd kind of worked a couple basketball tournaments other than coaching at Bothell. And so when I became the AD, they both were like, "You got to go to the WASA conference." And I'm like, "Okay, I have
Okay.
no idea what this is, right?" They're just like, "It's an AD conference, and you need to be there as a first year AD." I'm like, "Okay." So I get there, and Saturday morning is golf, and I'm not golfing, but
Okay.
I'm walking around with John Applegate, and the first person John Applegate introduces me to is Dave Ticker.
Okay.
But Dave Tigger goes, Melton, nice to meet you. Hop in the cart with me. We're gonna ride around and go meet some people. So we spend the next 45 minutes to an hour just riding around in the golf cart, just getting to know one another. And he's pulling up the different tees and talking to different people and introducing me to different people. And that's kind of how I got my name out there because I was riding in a golf cart with Dave Ticker. And so then I meet Rebecca Moe, who's a local AD here. And she goes,
Hmm.
will you speak at the conference next year? And I'm going, Rebecca, I just got here. And she goes, but I know you can do it. So my second year as an AD, I speak at the AD conference. And I was a nervous wreck. And I called Lance, Lance, what do I do? And he goes, Melton, you're gonna be just fine. And just remember, they're only gonna get what you give them. But still being who I am, I want to make sure I'm giving them my best. And so and I look in the and I think I probably had about 45 people in my room that day. And I just gave them what I had. And so I walked away going, you did your very best. And I had several people coming to me, thank you for being here, thank you for your words, and and hopefully you felt encouraged by those that were in the room. And so it all started with just hanging out with Dave Ticker on a golf cart. And then we got an email about um Wasa opening up new positions on the board. And I decided, you know what? The only way you're gonna learn is by getting involved. And so I submitted my name,
Okay.
not even thinking I was gonna get selected. But the night they were gonna make their selection, they go, we're gonna select all three of you.
Wow.
But prior to that night, when I did my interview, they asked, what's going to separate you from everybody else? And I go, well, the one thing that's going to separate myself from other people is not to boast, but I don't think anybody has a personality like me, but I'm going to be myself. But also what I'm going to do is commit to getting my CAA at this moment. So if I'm elected, I'm going to get my CAA. And so
Okay.
when they selected me, I kept my promise. And last year I got my CAA.
That's
And,
awesome.
and so it was just one of those things where you just go, okay, make your commitments and you keep them. So my plans now is to at some point start the process to get my CMAA, along with I have the privilege and pretty humbled moment to run the WASA conference next year. And so I'm pretty excited about that.
That is awesome. Thanks for sharing. So you've mentioned already a couple of the Washington legends, at least the ones that I know. Ticker, Rebecca, obviously. I think about Timmy Graham, who I've known for years, Jim Piccolo, Wendy. And I'm sure there's others in Washington I'm forgetting, so forgive me. But yeah, do you have a couple of stories besides the golf cart with Dave that you can share with us about hanging out with these Washington legends?
Um, I'll talk about Tim Graham. Actually, I'll go back. You know Scott Nordy.
Sure, I know Scott.
So
Now
Scott
he's going
Nordy.
to be mad at me because I failed to mention his name.
So Scott Nordy was inducted into the Hall of Fame a couple years ago. And so as a new AD, I'm sitting back there and I'm watching the video, and there's a couple of pictures that keep popping up. And I keep looking at one of the kids that's in the pictures, and it's AJ, which is Scott's son.
Hmm.
AJ and I were in class together at UW. We got our master's degree. So I actually was in the same room with Scott before I became an AD. And
That's awesome.
so after the meeting, I go up to Scott and his wife and I go, I think we have somebody in common. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, your son, AJ, and I were in the same class together. And so we take a picture and we send it to AJ. And AJ's like, what do he sends me a text. What is going on here? And so we had a good laugh. And so anytime I see Scott and his wife, I always have to ask how AJ is. And because AJ was one of those people that there was only 51 of us in our program. And
Mhm.
so we all became close because we all had long projects that we had to work together on. And it was one of those things where we all leaned on each other. And so to this day, there's still about 7 or 8 of them that we text and we check in on. And that's when we graduated in 2019 and with our master's degree. And I was the oldest one in the room by 17 years. And in that whole process, one of the questions was, what will you do in this program to make sure you're successful? And I told them that I would commit to surrounding myself with quality people that are going to help me through this program. And that's exactly what I did. And that's kind of how my Scott Norrie story goes. Tim Graham, when I was working on my CAA, and Tim Graham lives about 2 hours south of where I live,
Sure, down Olympia. Sure.
down in Olympia. And so when we would do our cohort, him, along with him and um, Eric Titus would travel up to our area to host this 3 to 4 hour meeting with no question. And so there was that commitment to saying, hey, we're going to do what we can to make sure you guys are able to get your CAA. And so just having an opportunity to sit and have conversations with Tim. The one thing that I enjoy about several of these people, Dave, Scott, Tim, Yanni, Lance, Rebecca, um, Lacey, Kyle,
Hmm.
um, Cole, I'm sorry, Cole Kenyer and Lauren McDaniel, they all have smiles on their faces no matter what they're doing. And the joy of those people have given me the strength to go through a lot as an AD and knowing that those people are going through the same thing I go through on a daily basis. I'm not sure if you know Suzanne Vick or Russ Waterman. Those are
Yeah, met them. Yes. Hmm.
two other individuals I know if I pick up the phone and say, hey, I need to talk, or what's this, or what's that. And if I need a hard conversation, they're going to give it to me. But I know it's going to be done with love. And all of those individuals, I have nothing but the utmost respect for and what they do in their communities, what they do on the state level, and what they're wanting to accomplish on the national level. And so when I get to hang out with them, I feel pretty privileged. And so to call them my friends and my colleagues is an honor.
Some great stories. Thank you so much for taking me down memory lane with all those great Washington people. Let me ask you about were you able to attend the most recent conference in Austin, the national conference?
I was not. We had made some plans to attend, and I just had some family stuff and some stuff come up at school that I was not able to get there. But I've already kind of started the process to make sure I'm in Tampa. And
Good,
so,
because then I will make sure to look you up so we can actually meet in person because obviously, well, people should have picked this up. We've never met before today, so let's
yes,
get back to the interview. What's the most favorite part of the most favorite? What's the favorite part of your job, Milton?
the favorite part of my job is watching my student athletes perform. If it be in tennis, golf, badminton, swim, basketball, football, track, just knowing that they put in hard work, baseball, softball, and they're doing their very best. And I always tell them whatever their very best is, I can accept. And as long as I know it's their best, I'm okay with that. We have a different conversation when I ask the question, how did you do? And they're like, well, I could have done better. And I'm like, okay, what could you have done better? And most of the time they say preparation
Hmm.
or I was a little lazy. I didn't do this. And I go, so now we know what we got to do next. We got to change our mindset to make sure that we're prepared to be successful the next time. So watching them be successful, man, brings me joy. I got to go watch a couple years. I got to go watch state tennis for the first time. Blown away by the competition and it was girls tennis, and just the strength of some of these individuals. And the funny thing about it is when they had girls tennis and boys tennis kind of going on at the same location. So I'm down in the girls area, and it's very quiet. But when you hear that, when you walk through the door to go to the boys side of thing, there's grunting, you hear screeching, there's sneakers on the ground, but it's just like they're doing their thing. And so that was a joy. But no, watching them perform and seeing them smile and being happy for one another is a joy of what I get to do.
Great. Let's finish up with a couple of questions, Melton. The first being this. You have two suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator. They need to follow Milton's suggestions in order to become a success. What would your two suggestions be?
My two suggestions would be find a mentor that pours into you, and they can be up straight and forward with you, and just know that you're loved by that individual. And I would say the second thing is allow yourself to be stretched a little bit when it comes to your personal development in this role, because you're going to need it because it's going to happen. And so if you allow yourself, it's a little bit easier to endure. But when you're like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do this. But when you just know, okay, I need to get these things done for my own personal development, it makes it so much easier to endure the hard times, the hard conversations. When you're thinking about, did I make the right decision by taking this position? But if you can find a mentor and do your personal development, it makes it so much easier.
Thank you. Great suggestions. We'll finish with this question. Melton, what questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Um, I don't think there's anything that you failed to ask me because I can talk, and that if you ask anybody about me, um, I'll just share this, and it still blows my wife away because in high school I was a very shy kid, and going on my mission to Philadelphia kind of opened me up to trying to talk to people about Christ and about things like that nature. The worst thing they can say is no. And so that gave me
Sure.
the strength to go, if no doesn't hurt, then I'm gonna be okay. And so um just being able to step outside yourself, how did I become I would say that my question that I hoped you would ask, how did I get to this point to be able to talk, is being able to learn how to step outside myself. Because that's what we do as ADs, as leaders, even when we don't think people are watching, they are. And so we just have to be mindful of that. And that's what I would say um, next time to ask somebody that when they have that opportunity. Yeah.
That is awesome. I couldn't have said it better myself. On that note, that wraps up this edition for the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today, Melton Jefferson III, Director of Athletics at North Creek High School in Bothell, Washington. Certified Athletic Administrator, Melton. I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope my message reaches as many as possible, and I hope they learn some from my steps.
You did an incredible job. Thank you again. For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.